So I've just played 10 battles for my win rate challenge in Niord. So it's only 10 games, but I think in that 10 games I've got a pretty good handle on it. I started playing it really badly because I hadn't quite grasped quite how fragile the Niord is. So Niord only has 67,100 hit points as built. That's with all the signals and everything like that. So you are basically with cruiser hit points. So there are some tier 9 cruisers which come quite close to having the same number of hit points by like 1,000. So that is this ship's really big Achilles heel, is the fact that it doesn't have many hit points. You do have very accurate guns. So you have Bismarck guns, basically. So you have 380mm guns in 4 double turrets. The angles aren't quite as good as you would expect, especially on this rear turret, which is miles behind everything else. You would expect this to have really good angles and maybe be 360. No. This actually has to stop firing for this AA mount here, so actually the back angle is terrible. But the front 3 guns are actually pretty good with their angles, at least shooting forwards. But the accuracy on those guns is actually really, really good. The reload is also really, really good. So built for reload, you have a base 18-ish second reload, and with adrenaline rush and things like that, that can go down to about 15 during a match. And that means basically you're firing twice as often as most other battleships. And that combined with the caliber means that you're actually very, very dangerous to cruisers, because if a cruiser makes a mistake or you see a cruiser sitting within your range next to an island or something and you've got a good angle shot on it, then you can very quickly take that cruiser apart. But the difficulty is you need to be in a position to do that. And you don't have the ability to tank. You do have a 32mm armor scheme, so you can bow tank. So it looks pretty good. Like when you look at the armor scheme, it looks pretty good on paper. But you're playing with an armor scheme that's wrapped around that low hit point pool. And so you can't do what I like to do when I play battleships like this, which is kind of like park in a waiting position on a flank, looking for those cross shots, and then waiting for an opportunity to do a push. Because if you get spotted, which you will do because you're a battleship, if there's maybe a torp destroyer or something in front of you spotting you, a submarine spotting you, there's planes flying overhead, you're going to get shots taken at you, and you cannot afford to lose those hit points. Because even a battleship volley hitting your superstructure, if you're angled, is going to take off way too much health to be acceptable. If you take a torp, even if it's a European torp, it's going to take off way too much hit points. So you have to try and position yourself almost like a Slava or a Champagne or something like a sniping ship that has the same kind of survivability. But the thing with Slava and ships like that is that they are not tanky because of their armor scheme. This is not tanky because of its hit point pool, not its armor scheme. The other feature of the ship, which is really interesting, is that it has European torpedoes in 2 launchers on each side, which have 15-kilometer range, and they're quite fast because they're European torpedoes. Low damage, of course. Very good angles. And that, again, is a little bit of... They're nice to have, don't get me wrong, but they're a little bit of a trap. Because when I started playing this, the first few games, I had it in my head at the beginning of the game that I was going to go in, because the torps load pretty quickly, go in, torp through the caps or the alleys or whatever it is on the map that I was on, and then turn out and be a fragile battleship. You cannot do that, because even though you have very good base concealment, so as built full concealment 12.2, if you get spotted by a destroyer or a submarine or a plane or something like that, and something takes a shot at you, you're going to regret it. You cannot get shot at too much. And so you cannot do that thing that I like to do at the beginning of a match in a ship that can stealth torp, where you push in, torp through, and then leave. And so it has this horrible, frustrating period at the beginning of a game where you just have to stay back. You have to force yourself to stay back and wait and see where things are. But if you do that, if you can actually manage to have the patience to step back and be that battleship in the background, you can actually make a huge difference. Because if everyone leaves you alone, then your guns can go to work, and that's where you become really, really dangerous, especially if you can park in a position where people can't return fire and you can take those cross shots. So you really need to look out for cruisers that might get spotted making a stupid turn, smoking cruisers that might get spotted leaving their smoke screen, or coming out of the front of their smoke screen accidentally, cruisers that are sitting on an island, battleships with squishy broadsides that are sitting at silly angles, nose in, and have forgotten that you're there. So yeah, it's a very simple ship to understand. Basically, it's a very fragile battleship with fast-firing, accurate 380mm guns that has stealth torps, 15-kilometer stealth torps, but you need to not focus on those torps, otherwise you will die. So this is definitely not for beginners. This is definitely a ship that needs a bit of experience and a lot of situational awareness. But if you can put all those things together and you can resist the temptation to play any kind of aggression, you absolutely have to play this as carefully as you can and at longer ranges. Because you just don't have the hit point pool. But if you can do all those things, if you can juggle all those temptations and all those mechanical things, this actually is not a bad ship. Like most dockyard ships, this is pretty well balanced at the moment, I would say, because it has some big positives with those guns and pretty nice torps, but with some significant negatives of the survivability. And so I think that's quite a nice balance. But because of you have to balance those two things together, it's pretty tricky to play. So all in all, I think it's interesting. I think it's pretty good. It's not amazing like most dockyard ships, but I think it's pretty good. And if you fancy getting the 2 stages for free, if you fancy getting the 2 stages for the starter pack, then for the doubloons that you pay for the starter pack, it's a pretty good ship for the price. And cut.